Every conclusion is captive to its premise. Before a nation changes its laws, it first changes its ideas. Before it changes its ideas, it changes the premises from which it reasons. As America approaches her 250th birthday, perhaps no question is more important than this. Have we forgotten the premise that made this republic possible? Coming to you from the MAB Podcast Network, this is On The Brink with Michael Allen Brown. As Americans, we find ourselves approaching an extraordinary moment in our nation's history. On July 4th, 2026, the United States of America will commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Across this nation, there will be parades, ceremonies, speeches, and fireworks illuminating the night sky in celebration of the birth of one of history's greatest experiments in human liberty. Yet anniversaries are more than occasions for celebration. They are occasions for reflection. They compel every generation to ask a simple yet profound question. Do we still understand the principles that gave this nation life? It would be a profound irony if at the very moment America celebrates her 250th birthday, the constitutional principles that have sustained this republic for 2.5 centuries were permitted to fade before the smoke of the celebration's fireworks had even cleared. That possibility should concern every American, not because of political party, but because of principle. Before we discuss politics, before we debate economics, before we choose one ideology over another, we must first examine the premise from which our conclusions are drawn. I call this the premise of reason. The premise of reason is the foundational proposition from which rational inquiry begins, and by which every conclusion should be tested. For if the premise is flawed, the conclusion, regardless of how passionately defended, cannot escape the weakness of its foundation. Every generation inherits ideas. Some endure because they are true. Others endure because they have simply been repeated often enough to become familiar. But familiarity is not proof, neither is popularity. Truth demands examination. Today I invite you to examine two very different premises. The first is the premise upon which America's constitutional republic was founded. It begins with the belief that our rights are not granted by government, but endowed by our Creator. Government therefore exists not to bestow liberty, but to preserve it. Its powers are intentionally limited. Authority is deliberately divided. The individual citizen, not the state, remains sovereign under law. This premise assumes something remarkable about human nature. It assumes that people flourish when liberty and responsibility walk hand in hand. It assumes that work possesses dignity, that initiative deserves reward, that innovation should be encouraged, that citizens, families, churches, charities, and local communities are capable of accomplishing much without the consent and the constant direction of a central government. Now, let us examine another premise. The socialist premise begins with a different understanding. Its objective is generally to achieve greater economic equality through collective governmental action. Many who advocate such policies do so from sincere compassion for those who struggle. Compassion is a virtue. Indeed, it should characterize every civilized society. But the premise of reason requires us to ask questions that extend beyond just good intentions. Does increasing governmental responsibility for economic outcomes strengthen individual responsibility, or gradually weaken it? When the connection between effort and reward becomes increasingly dependent upon governmental distribution, what becomes of personal initiative? What becomes of entrepreneurship? What becomes of innovation? What becomes of the incentive for self-improvement? History offers examples that thoughtful people continue to study and debate. Some societies have expanded governmental control over large portions of economic life with results their supporters and critics interpret differently. Whether one's conclusions about those examples are this or that, they invite serious examination of how incentives, individual freedom, economic opportunity, and governmental power interact. These are not merely economic questions. They are questions about human nature itself. The framers of our Constitution understood that power, however well intended, requires restraint. That is why they divided it, limited it, balanced it. Not because government is unnecessary, but because liberty is precious. The issue before America today is not whether we should care for one another. Of course we should. The real question is this: what system best preserves both compassion and liberty? What system best encourages responsibility while protecting opportunity? What system best safeguards the dignity of every individual without concentrating excessive power in the hands of the state? These are not questions that should be answered by slogans, nor by emotion, nor by political fashion. They should be answered by reason, by history, by evidence, by an honest examination of the premises from which we reason. Now, I have not asked you to accept my conclusions. I have simply invited you to examine the premise. For every conclusion is ultimately captive to the premise from which it is drawn. Permit me now to speak directly to the younger generation. One day, this republic will no longer be entrusted to my generation. It will belong to yours. You will determine what kind of nation your children inherit. My hope is not that you simply adopt my conclusions. My hope is that you never surrender your capacity to reason. Read history. Study the Constitution. Examine competing ideas honestly. Ask the difficult questions. Test every premise before embracing every conclusion. If after doing so, you arrive at different conclusions than mine, you will at least have honored the very principle upon which a free republic depends, that citizens think carefully before they choose. For the future of America will not be determined merely by elections. It will be determined by the quality of reasoning within the hearts and minds of those who inherit her. That is my hope for you. Before we part today, permit me one final reflection. The Republic is not lost because its citizens disagree. Indeed, thoughtful disagreement is one of the greatest strengths of a free people. A republic is endangered when its citizens cease to examine the premises upon which their freedom depends. When slogans replace reason, when emotion eclipses evidence, when conclusions are embraced without first testing the premises from which they arise, liberty itself becomes increasingly vulnerable. That is why every generation bears a sacred responsibility, not merely to celebrate the inheritance of freedom, but to understand it, to preserve it, and to pass it faithfully to those who will one day stand where we now stand. As America enters her 250th year, may we celebrate not only the passage of time, but the enduring principles that have made this constitutional public a beacon of ordered liberty for generations. May our fireworks illuminate more than the night sky. May they rekindle within us a renewed appreciation for the wisdom, the courage, and the constitutional vision of those who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish this nation. And may the smoke from those celebrations never obscure the timeless principles that made them worthy of celebration in the first place. I'm Michael Allen Brown. Thank you for joining me on The Brink.